Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a room that smells like 10 different types of flower, 5 kinds of medicine, and at least one questionable ointment. You walk in slowly, your slippers padding against ancient stone, and the air is thick with a strange marriage of rosemary, beeswax, and something that vaguely reminds you of yesterday's roast. Not exactly the kitchen, not exactly the infirmary, but definitely the place you'd end up if you stubbed your toe, smelled funny, or had dreams about your teeth falling out. It's tucked into the side wing of the manor house, humming with quiet activity and more than a little mystery. Think of it as the medieval version of a spa, a lab, a drugstore, and occasionally a danger zone for experimental fragrances. The torches flicker against the thick plaster walls, casting shadows on shelves lined with dusty bottles, bowls of crushed herbs, and copper tools that look part chemistry set, part medieval torture kit. This is the still room, and you, lucky soul, are spending the night here. Unlike the clatter of the kitchen or the stomp of the great hall, this is a space where concentration and precision are everything. A wrong drop of pennyroyal, and suddenly your relaxation tonic becomes a mildly alarming laxative. True story, asked the Lord's second cousin. He's still recovering. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Historians still argue whether this was about tradition, availability, or the belief that only women could handle things like menstrual balm recipes without fainting. Supposed to help with headaches, though ironically, its preparation almost guarantees one. You glance at the cauldron it came from, still bubbling, still mildly threatening. You lean closer to one of the shelves and spot a small glass bottle with something oily and golden trapped inside. Not because you've been here before, but because parts of it exist even now. Which, let's be honest, someone in history definitely was. Your grandma's camphor chest? Still room energy. That homemade rosemary hair rinse TikTok keeps recommending? Medieval throwback. The idea of natural ingredients, handcrafted cures, slow processes, none of it is new. It's just rebranded. Labeled in gorgeous quill script, Oleum rosarum, rose oil, extracted drop by agonizing drop from petals gathered just after dawn. Not for pets, but for collecting, medicinal substances. And ever so slightly dangerous. You'll need to keep your wits about you, and maybe don to sniff too deeply over the open jars. Swallow nests for facial paste, lizard tails for eye drops, powdered ants for who knows what. This was less pet-friendly apothecary and more trial by small creature. Everything is oriented inward, focused. You spot a copper alembic resting on a low shelf, the coil of its pipe twisting like a curled-up snake. It looks complex and ancient, but then again, so does everything in here. And while it was meant for distilling herbal waters and essential oils, you get the feeling some ambitious soul once tried to make spirits in it and was never seen again. It's one of the more glamorous substances in the room. Sure, but just inches away is a jar that says goat tallow, which sort of ruins the poetry. Either way, she holds the keys, literally and figuratively, to every bottle, salve, and experimental mint poultice in the room. A large ceramic bowl once white, now confused beige rests in the corner, holding a thick, bubbling substance. Possibly soap. The air crackles with the scent of old thyme, both the herb, not in the industrial sense, but in the daily sense. Things are constantly being created, transformed, bottled, wrapped, and occasionally abandoned when they start growing unexpected colors. And every recipe is handwritten in an enormous leather-bound ledger, complete with marginal doodles, ink smudges, and the occasional passive-aggressive note to an apprentice. And the passage of time itself, making you feel like you're wrapped in a warm, slightly astringent blanket. If Hogwarts had a bath and body aisle, this would be it. Possibly food, probably both, at some point. The room is warm, but not from sunlight. It's from the long-suffering hearth fire tucked into a corner, where iron cauldrons belch soft steam like dragons who've taken up crafts. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where in we listening from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background tone. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trace your fingers along a wooden counter, still stained from last week's rosehip extraction. On the walls, bunches of herbs hang upside down: lavender, sage, wormwood, mint, tansy all tied with twine and just slightly threatening to fall on your head. The still room is ruled by silence, and that's no accident. This room belongs to the lady of the house, or sometimes a senior servant trusted with her secrets. And yes, it's almost always a woman, but let's talk about that faint sweetness in the air. This place, for all its delicate scents and floral prettiness, is also a factory. There's a small window set high into the stone wall, barely letting in light, but the room doesn't really need it. And speaking of questionable experiments, do you smell that? No, not the lavender. Underneath it, that slightly bitter, sharp note? That's probably feverfew steeping in rainwater. What's amazing is how familiar this room feels. And here's a fringe tidbit for you. Some still rooms included tiny animal cages. So as you settle deeper into this warm, herbaceous world, just remember, it's all very lovely, very peaceful. After all, you probably won't survive this if you're allergic to beeswax, goat grease, or fennel. You hear her before you see her, a slow, deliberate step, the soft hiss of fabric brushing stone, and the gentle rattle of a key ring, heavy with responsibility. The lady of the house enters not like royalty, but like a queen of her own peculiar domain. She wears a long apron already stained with rosewater and soot, her sleeves rolled up, and her brow faintly smudged with ash from tending the coals. If you expected delicacy, think again. She's not here to smile demurely over flower petals. She's here to supervise lye mixing and make sure no one dies of a bad cough. This is her space. While her husband negotiates taxes or flirts with gout in the Great Hall, she runs this sanctum with military precision. Her knowledge is inherited, practiced, and expanded by experience. Some of it written in the family's recipe ledger, some whispered by older women, and some well found by trial error, and occasionally a very bad rash. You watch as she moves through the room with unhurried purpose. To one side, she opens a drawer and pulls out a square of beeswax. To the other, she dips a finger into a small bowl of thick green paste, sniffing it critically. A faint frown appears. "Too much sage," she murmurs, and adds a pinch of dried violet from the hanging bundles. One sniff later, she nods. Problem solved. Face cream rescued. It's easy to think of her as a medieval pharmacist, but really, she's more than that. Her role bleeds into midwifery, housekeeping, perfumery, even rudimentary chemistry. She prepares everything from anti-plague pomanders to rose petal confits to keep her household sweet-smelling inside and out. Her sense of smell is as honed as a bloodhound's. If someone walks into her presence reeking of too much garlic, she knows they've been sneaking the tonic meant for the steward. Again, she's also a gatekeeper. The still room is locked when unattended, and only she and one or two trusted assistants hold the keys. The risks are real. Some herbs can kill, some tinctures burn, and one unfortunate attempt at distilling brandy last winter ended with a very loud bang and one missing eyebrow. The apprentice is still sheepish. Historians still argue whether the lady's central role in the still room was a form of genuine power or just more unpaid domestic labor with better smelling outcomes. On one hand, she held medical sway over her entire household. On the other, she was expected to do it all, while also overseeing linens, food storage, and possibly 12 children. But in this room, at least she has authority. Even her husband doesn't barge in probably, because last time he did, he got squirted with hot lavender oil and fled sneezing. She pauses at the ledger, flipping through the heavy pages with fingers calloused, not from embroidery, but from grinding roots. You peek over her shoulder and catch glimpses of long-forgotten recipes. To soothe a colicky child, steep fennel and dill in goat's milk. Add 3 drops of honey. Administer before the moon wanes. And just below that, scrawled in a different hand, did not work? Try removing the honey? The ledger isn't just a record. It's a diary, a survival guide, a confessional. You spot scribbles, corrections, tiny ink stars beside particularly successful concoctions. There's even one recipe labeled simply "Never Again," underlined 3 times. She speaks softly to her apprentice, a girl of perhaps 15 with ink-stained fingertips and a nervous posture. "Fetch the elderflower infusion," she says, and the girl bolts toward a shelf so quickly she nearly knocks over a jar of orris root. The lady sighs, adjusts the shelf, and murmurs something under her breath about too much energy, not enough elbows. The still room, despite its title, is rarely still. There's always something to do: ointment to stir, herbs to chop, spirits to distill, or infusions to strain. And through it all, she orchestrates the rhythm like a quiet conductor with a basil-scented baton. It's easy to forget, in the soft light and floral smells, that her work is deadly serious. People in this household rely on her concoctions to soothe burns, fight fevers, and occasionally survive childbirth. If a child is ill, she stays up through the night, measuring spoonfuls of valerian syrup and whispering prayers between doses. If someone's breath turns sweet and sickly, the feared sign of impending death, she scrambles to make poultices, even though she knows the odds are slim. You begin to see her not just as a lady, but as a quiet sort of warrior. One arm not with sword or shield, but with juniper oil, beeswax, and grim determination. Here's a quirky detail. In some wealthier households, the lady would wear a perfume ring, a small hinged trinket on her finger, filled with a scented balm. Not just for elegance, but to sniff discreetly when the air turned foul, which, in a manner with chamber pots and damp corridors, was often. The ring she wears now is simpler, a flat silver band etched with rosemary, protection and memory, and judging by the slight indentation in her finger, she's worn it every day for years. And yet, despite the endless work, she takes pleasure in small victories. When a batch of rose petal conserve turns out just right, ruby red, fragrant, with no mold in sight, she allows herself a tiny smile. When the steward stops limping after her country salve, she raises an eyebrow at him like, of course it worked. And in the quiet moments, when the fire burns low and even the apprentice has gone to bed, She sometimes takes a small glass vial of her own making, unseals it, and dabs a touch behind her ears. A personal scent, something soft and musky, perhaps with hints of violet or neroli. A reminder that in this world of sickness, chores, and cracked hands, she's still a woman who knows how to make beauty bloom from boiling fat and crushed petals. The fire crackles low in the corner, and its glow dances across the tools of the trade, most of them heavy, copper, and slightly menacing. You drift closer, eyeing a peculiar contraption that resembles a teapot married to a squid. It's still, specifically an alembic, used for distilling herbal waters and essential oils. The bulbous base warms slowly over coals, while the vapor slinks through a coiled pipe before dripping ever so dramatically into a small glass vial. The room hisses and pops with quiet activity. Beside the alembic sits a stone mortar, its surface worn smooth from years of grinding everything from rose hips to dried beetles. A wooden pestle rests beside it, still dusted in sage powder and maybe a little finger grease. You spot tongs, wooden spoons, beeswax candles, and what appears to be a small shovel, no idea if that's for measuring herbs or scraping out burnt goop. Probably both. Despite their humble appearance, these tools are precious. Copper stills are expensive. Glass vials shatter if you so much as look at them wrong. And the iron cauldrons? They weigh as much as a teenage ox and have the burn scars to prove it. One even has a name scratched into it, Old Nellie. You're not sure if that's affectionate or a warning. The cauldrons are the workhorses here, boiling fat, steeping herbs, reducing syrups until they're thick enough to coat the back of the spoon, but thin enough to pour. And always under watch. One unattended boil can turn a lavender infusion into a blackened horror that smells like floral regret. That strange glass cylinder on the shelf, that's a urinal flask used in diagnosing illness. Because yes, in medieval medicine, urine was basically the medieval version of a health app. Its color, scent, and consistency told a still room expert everything from your liver condition to whether you'd been sneaking ale. The lady sometimes examines these with a practiced eye, but never before lunch. She has standards. Nearby sits a set of tiny brass weights and a hand-carved balance scale. Every drop, every grain matters. Too much henbane, and your sleeping draught becomes a let's see God potion. Too little, and you're wide awake at 3 a.m. contemplating the existence of demons in your pantry. You note a curious item on the far shelf, a delicate glass retort with a cracked lip. It's beautiful in the way vintage horror props are beautiful. Probably retired after one too many failed experiments. Or perhaps after it exploded when someone tried to distill turpentine. There's also a sieve made of stretched fabric over a wooden frame used for straining infusions and sometimes drying herbs. It smells faintly of mint and something sharper wormwood, perhaps. Or regret, hard to tell. Here's your mainstream fact for the evening. Stills and alembics were widely used in the medieval Islamic world before reaching Europe. The technology for distillation, both medicinal and alcoholic, owes much to Arabic alchemists like Jabir ibn Hayyan. When European noble houses embraced the still room, they were unknowingly building on centuries of earlier knowledge. That copper alembic in the corner? It's both an inheritance and a risky science experiment. Over in the storage nook, you spot clay jars sealed with beeswax, their handwritten tags dangling from string. You can't help but peek. One says unguentum papaversa poppy ointment used for pain. Another reads aqua vita, water of life or very strong alcohol, depending on who's asking. You pause at a third jar, labeled cat's foot. You hope that's a plant. You really, really do. And what's that odd funnel-shaped horn? That's for pouring liquids between containers without wasting a drop. They weren't big on plastic measuring cups back then. Every transfer had to be deliberate and steady-handed. The apprentice once tried pouring mint extract without the horn. The room smelled like toothpaste for a week, and the steward kept sneezing uncontrollably during prayers. There's even a small, chipped ceramic item shaped like a spoon but hollow. It's called a clyster. Let's just say it's not for feeding soup. You set that back down carefully. Very carefully. Historians still argue whether the proliferation of such tools in manner still rooms reflected actual scientific understanding or just elaborate rituals dressed up as medicine. Some insist medieval women understood plant-based chemistry far better than they're given credit for. Others say it was mostly guesswork and vibes, with occasional explosions. Regardless, the ladies' tools dangerous, beautiful, and often irreplaceable tell their own quiet story. A tale of care, labor, learning passed through generations, and just enough trial and error to keep things interesting. And here's a delightful fringe detail. In some households, they believed that if you stirred your potions counterclockwise, it attracted illness. So every stirring, every boil, every step had its rituals, not just for science, but for superstition too. You imagine trying to explain to her that people today blend oils in little plug-in diffusers with built-in lights. She'd probably squint at it, sniff, and say, useful. But what does it do during the plague? The hearth flares for a moment, throwing light onto the bronze ladles hanging above. Each one shaped a little differently, each with a long handle to keep hands from burning. They dangle like strange fruit, their edges blackened by countless boiling batches. The apprentice steps into the glow again, carefully lifting one of the ladles with both hands to decant a syrupy brew into a long-necked bottle. The funnel makes a soft glugging noise. Not a drop is spilled. She's learning, slowly, carefully, as you are just by watching. These tools aren't just instruments. They are extensions of a woman's intent devices that transform raw garden bounty into something healing, cleansing, or just pleasantly minty. And while modern medicine has thankfully moved beyond, say, powdered snail slime, there's something oddly comforting about the idea that precision, curiosity, and maybe a little bravery still define the art of healing. Just maybe keep an eye on that alembic. It's starting to hiss again. The garden calls you next, not with words, but with a heady breeze one that carries sage, marjoram, and a whisper of damp earth. You push open the still room's side door and step into the herb garden, the very heart of everything that happens inside. It isn't grand, but it's purposeful. Beds are laid out in tidy rows, bordered by rough-hewn stones. Every plant here has a job, a story, and occasionally an attitude. Your shoes squish slightly on the dewy soil as you wander between stalks of lavender, their purple heads bobbing in approval. To your right, rosemary bushes stand like tiny green soldiers. Farther off, chamomile sprawls in lazy clumps, like it hasn't quite woken up yet. You crouch beside a patch of calendula golden and defiant, and gently run your fingers across the sticky petals. That resin is where the healing hides. Everything grown here ends up bottled, boiled, or crushed. Nothing is for decoration. Every stem carries purpose, and every purpose has a backstory. Take rue, for example. good for vision, allegedly keeps evil spirits away, and also smells like old socks. You win some, you lose some. The lady of the house appears beside you, holding a small knife and a woven basket. She doesn't say much. This is a sacred ritual. She snips valerian root, pulls a few sprigs of lemon balm, and digs gently for angelica, her hands moving with muscle memory. This morning's haul will be dried, hung, steeped, or pressed before sunset. Freshness matters, especially when your headache remedy might turn into a laxative if left out too long. Here's your mainstream fact. Medieval still rooms often had their own dedicated gardens, usually referred to as physic gardens. Monasteries had them too. These gardens weren't about beauty, though they often were beautiful. They were about survival. In a world before aspirin and antibiotics, hypericum was your go-to for wounds. Comfrey knit broken bones, and whorehounds tried to talk phlegm into leaving your chest. You pass a curious patch of belladonna. It looks innocent enough soft green leaves and sweet black berries, but it's deadly in the wrong dose. One drop too much, and your relaxing bedtime cordial turns into a personal visit from St. Peter, which is why it's tied off with twine and marked with a small slate sign. Handle with caution, or don't. Some plants are there just to keep pests away. Tansy, with its button yellow blooms, deters ants and worms. Mint, while lovely in tea, also keeps rodents from chewing through the root cellar. And garlic, oh garlic, it's in everything. You step near one bed and the smell punches you directly in the sinuses. It's protection, seasoning, and breath ruiner all in one. The medieval multitasker. A dragonfly skims the top of a water basin near the center of the garden. You kneel to look inside. Floating in the shallow basin are the petals of rose, borage, and elderflower softening before being steeped into gentle skin tonics. The lady used to have the apprentice pick petals before dawn when their oils were strongest. Of course, the apprentice once slept through and substituted wilted blooms. The result smelled like wet laundry. Lesson learned. Historians still argue whether the garden's layout followed scientific principles or more mystical ones. Some believe beds were arranged according to planetary correspondences. Venus for love herbs, Mars for warriors' cures. Others say it was more about proximity and what could survive the snails. Either way, some of these garden designs appear in household books with surprising consistency. You pause at a cluster of plants with confusing names: self-heal, dead nettle, lamb's ears. There's something cozy in how many herbs sound like characters from a children's book. Yet most of them were used for real ailments: wounds, burns, melancholy, and even heartache. And then there's mugwort, always mugwort, for dreams, digestion, or possibly warding off werewolves. No one's quite sure. A fringe tidbit: in some households, it was believed that plants responded to kindness. So the lady speaks softly while she harvests, muttering gentle thanks to her valerian root and murmuring apologies when she tugs nettles free. You smile. She might be on to something. After all, you wouldn't want to be yanked out of the ground without warning either. You watch her gather marjoram into a damp cloth and turn back toward the still room. No time to linger, the rosemary oil won't distill itself. And that bee buzzing suspiciously near your ear clearly agrees it's time to go. Inside, the harvest goes directly into the drying racks. Rows of cloth-covered screens stacked in the warmest corner, angled to catch just enough heat without scalding. The air fills with the crisp snap of mint, the earthy sigh of oregano, and the sharper tone of dried yarrow. It's like walking into a bread oven run by woodland creatures. Later, the dried herbs will be crushed with a stone roller or pounded into powder with a pestle. Some are kept loose in pouches. Others are packed into wax-sealed jars. You spot a basket labeled colds and coughs, a mix of licorice root, anise, and dried thyme. Practical. Another basket simply says romance, which smells suspiciously like cinnamon and regret. Every leaf in the still room had a life first. A morning in the sun, a brush with the wind, a chat with a bee. That garden outside may look quiet, but it's buzzing literally and figuratively with history, science, and just enough superstition to keep things interesting. You take a final look through the open door. The shadows are longer now. The lavender nods in approval. And that one squirrel glaring at you from the rosemary bush probably just wants his patch back. Back inside, the air has shifted. It's thicker now, heavier with smoke and the unmistakable tang of lye. A cauldron simmers over the hearth, releasing slow, loopy bubbles that remind you of something vaguely threatening, like a potion trying to decide whether it wants to congeal or explode. Soap-making day. You step around a wooden barrel filled with cloudy, pale yellow fat. Rendered from sheep or cows, it's already been boiled down and strained. The scent is assertive. Not quite revolting, but certainly more barnyard than spa. This is the base, the fatty canvas, on which this household's entire hygiene routine will be painted. Next to the fat barrel is a clay pot containing a harsh, white-gray paste, wood ash leached with rainwater. This is lye, and while it doesn't look like much, it's got bite. Strong lye will burn skin. Weak lye will just make your soap a sad, gooey failure. The apprentice once splashed some on her sleeve. That shirt now looks like it was attacked by moths with fire-based superpowers. Soap making is delicate chaos. You need equal parts science, stamina, and faith. The lady tests the lye's strength the old-fashioned way by floating an egg in it. If it sinks, the lie's too weak. If it floats too high, it's too strong. If it hovers like a lazy ghost, you're probably good to go. Historians still argue whether this technique was reliable or just wishful thinking with breakfast ingredients. Once the lye is ready, it's time to combine it with the fat. Carefully, very carefully. The two are stirred together in a massive cauldron using a long-handled paddle, preferably by someone with fireproof arms, and no other plans for the afternoon. The chemical reaction saponification is happening in real time. The fat breaks down, the lye slips in, and slowly, it thickens into something resembling wet plaster with an attitude. You lean in. The scent is improving, just barely, which is where the good stuff comes in. Dried lavender, rosemary, rose petals, maybe even lemon balm if the harvest was generous. The lady tosses them in like a priest, blessing holy water generously and with zero room for complaint. Here's your mainstream fact. Soap in medieval Europe wasn't a daily necessity. In fact, people often thought overbathing was dangerous. Soap was used mostly for laundry, occasional body scrubs, and desperate attempts to impress guests. That said, wealthier homes had access to softer, better-smelling soap than most peasants ever dreamed of. You catch a glimpse of a square wooden mold lined with linen cloth and waiting to receive the finished mixture. Once poured, it'll set for a day or two, then be sliced into rough blocks with a wire or blunt knife. No fancy branding, just clean in tube form. Some batches are for hand washing, some for linen. some for medical uses like washing wounds or prepping skin for poultices. And then there's the dreaded scouring soap, which has sand or ground shells mixed in. That one is for the truly dirty jobs and possibly enemies. A fringe tidbit? Some medieval recipes added animal brains to soap, believing it helped with lather. Whether this worked or just made everything worse is still debated. Thankfully, the lady here has better taste or at least stronger boundaries. You spot a few bars from an earlier batch, drying on a wooden rack. They're oddly shaped, vaguely beige, and cracked at the corners. One has a bit of straw stuck in it, rustic. You pick one up and sniff. It smells faintly of rosemary, wood smoke, and something else. Honesty, maybe, or mild despair. Either way, it'll probably clean your hands. Soap making is a once every few weeks event. It's messy, smelly, and takes a full day to execute properly. But without it, everything else starts to fall apart. You can't apply a salve to dirty skin. You can't mix perfumes in a bowl, coated in rancid oil. And you certainly can't expect anyone to drink your elderflower tonic if your hands still smell like fish. The apprentice leans against the wall, clearly exhausted from stirring. The lady hands her a cup of nettle tea with a knowing look. No words, just solidarity in the war against scum. And now comes the cleanup. Every tool, bowl, and finger must be rinsed, wiped, and hung to dry. The lye is poured into a separate sealed pot never left out. Last time someone forgot, the cat had a very bad day and now won't go near the still room. You peer at a small label pinned to the drying rack. Rose and sage, batch 8. Slightly lumpy. Honesty in labeling is timeless. You sit for a moment, letting the quiet settle. There's a strange satisfaction in all this, in the knowledge that from grease, ash, and elbow pain, something useful and almost luxurious emerges. It's a ritual of transformation, one that smells only mildly offensive. And here's the final detail. The lady keeps a bar wrapped in linen under her bed for special occasions, or nights when she just wants to remember that she made something clean and good from scratch. She unwraps it sometimes, just to smell the rosemary. You don't need much more than that, do you? By now, your nose is a veteran. You've survived soak day, lye clouds, and a brief encounter with old mutton fat. So the next scent that drifts toward you, heady, musky, and strangely hypnotic, feels like a reward. Perfume time. The still room is quieted into a slower rhythm. A glass vial of rosewater catches the candlelight and glows faint pink. Beside it, delicate bottles line a narrow shelf, each sealed with wax or fabric, some labeled with fading ink. Aqua Regine, sweet amber, violet cordial. You don't know what half of it is, but you would absolutely wear all of it to your next social event. Making perfume in the medieval still room is part science, part sorcery. Unlike soap, perfume wasn't just for cleanliness, it was armor. A way to mask the world's natural funk, which, let's be honest, was considerable. Personal hygiene was interpretive. So a good scent did more than make you smell nice. It elevated your status, repelled disease, and occasionally impressed bishops. Today, the lady begins by gently heating a clay pot of water over coals. Suspended in it is a small sachet filled with crushed rose petals, marjoram, and lemon peel. This is a steam infusion, a slow coaxing of fragrance, rather than a violent extraction. You sit nearby, watching the water cloud, and try not to inhale too hard. It smells divine but faintly intoxicating, like summer had a secret and whispered it to your sinuses. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Medieval perfumes didn't use alcohol as a base until much later. Most scents were oil or water-based, which meant they faded quickly but didn't dry out the skin. In fact, perfumes were often applied to clothes, hair combs, even gloves anywhere. The scent might linger longer than your last confession. The lady pours a fine trickle of scented water into a glass vial and seals it with wax. She holds it to the candle, checking for clarity. No cloudiness. No residue. Success. But perfumes weren't always gentle. Some of the strongest included musk from civet cats, ambergris from sperm whales, or castoreum from beavers. Yes, beavers. Technically, they're scent glands. Don't ask how they got it, you probably don't want to know. But these animal-based perfumes were prized for their staying power and sensuality. Nothing says romance like a dab of semi-digested whale barf behind the ears. The apprentice is assigned the more palatable task of making scented waters. Lavender water for linens, clove water for mouth rinses, even rosemary for rubbing on sore muscles or sad moods. She's careful, even reverent. You get the feeling she enjoys this part, a rare moment of beauty in the still rooms, usual parade of injuries and stomach cramps. She gently dips a strip of clean linen into the lavender water, then drapes it across a wooden rod to dry. Later, it'll be folded into clothing drawers or placed between sheets to ward off moths and maybe bad dreams. Fringe tidbit: some women carried tiny scented sachets in their sleeves or bodices. These weren't just to smell nice. They were practical. Imagine walking through a town square filled with open sewers and dead fish. A quick sniff of your lavender bundle could mean the difference between composure and gagging in public. One shelf holds something darker: the plague pomanders. Small hollow balls of metal, usually brass or silver hinged like tiny treasure chests. They're filled with strong-smelling herbs: myrrh, cloves, cinnamon, and sage. The idea was simple. If you couldn't see the disease, maybe you could keep it away by overpowering the air with smell. You would hang the pomander around your neck or dangle it from your belt like a festive death ornament. Historians still argue whether perfumes were more about scent or symbolism, whether their real power was chemical or psychological. Did they actually protect, or just make people feel safer in a world full of rot and rumors? You lean over a jar labeled amber deuce. Inside is a thick paste of honey, musk, and resins. It's stirred gently with a glass rod and formed into tiny balls that dry over days into powerful scent bombs. One pressed into your wrist would last for hours, maybe even days, though you might also be followed by every neighborhood cat. The lady keeps a personal bottle in a carved wooden box. It's her signature scent: bitter orange, violet, and just a whisper of sage. She dabs it behind her ears before feasts, or arguments, or both. You watch her open it, sniff deeply, and smile in a way that says, "Yes, I'm ready to survive whatever fresh disaster this household cooks up." Perfume isn't frivolous here. It's preparation, it's healing, it's personal power bottled. You return to the shelf and pick up a tiny vial labeled Tears of Florence. It smells faintly of lily, but also carries a distant spice cardamom, maybe? You're told it was a gift from a merchant. Imported, precious, possibly cursed. The lady keeps it sealed, just in case. As night falls, the room glows golden with candlelight. Every surface reflects soft light. The glass bottles shimmer like secrets. You sit back, letting the scents wrap around you. Sweet, sharp, resinous, floral. A symphony for the nose. Every layer tells a story, and you wonder what will your story smell like. You awaken to the sound of pestle on mortar, steady and insistent. The sun has barely climbed, but the still room is already alive, preparing for a day that promises less glamour than perfume and more. Mouth-related challenges. Today is all about the less celebrated, yet very necessary art of personal care. And not the dainty kind. We're talking tooth powders, deodorants, and various pastes to mask the distinct aroma of medieval peasant who slept near the pigs. You wander over to a long wooden table where the apprentice is hunched over a ceramic bowl, grinding something pale and chalky. Bone, crushed and sun-bleached. A main ingredient in today's tooth cleaning powder. She adds a pinch of salt, dried mint, and a mysterious black crumb that looks like it escaped from a burnt biscuit. Charcoal, actually. Excellent for whitening, terrible for your enamel. Dentistry hadn't been invented yet, but erosion? That was thriving. She mixes the powder with care, then tests it by dipping in a twig, a natural toothbrush, frayed at one end. It looks a little like a bundle of straw held together with optimism. She scrubs at her back teeth, winces slightly, and nods in approval. Good enough. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Medieval people did care about dental hygiene. In fact, some recipes survive for mouth rinses made with vinegar, wine, or herbal infusions. Clean teeth were considered attractive and a mark of good health. But fluoride? Orthodontics? Not quite on the menu. The lady appears with a new task: deodorant preparation. The word deodorant may not have existed yet, but the need definitely did. She sets out dried sage, rose petals, alum powder, and vinegar. The alum is the key. It's a natural astringent, helping to close sweat pores. That slightly sharp mineral scent? It clings to your skin and says, "I tried." The mixture is made into a thick paste, rolled into small balls, and set aside to dry. Once hardened, they'll be stored in small boxes and applied by rubbing under the arms or sewn into the underarm seams of shirts. Not quite antiperspirant, but still better than nothing. You pause at a bottle labeled simply Breath Aid. You open it, then immediately wish you hadn't. The scent is sharp part vinegar, part clove, part "why does this hurt my soul?" It's a mouth rinse, meant to kill bacteria, freshen breath, and probably strip paint from the walls. You try a drop on your tongue and regret every decision that led to this moment. Effective? Yes. Pleasant? Not in this century. A fringe tidbit. In some regions, people chewed on parsley or fennel seeds after meals to freshen their breath. And in wealthier homes, candied angelica root was offered part digestive aid, part breath perfume. The apprentice tries this method now, popping a sugar-coated piece of angelica into her mouth. She looks momentarily happy, then confused. Tastes like licorice. And regret, she says. You nod. Accurate. There's also the matter of body scrubs. With water scarce or cold, dry bathing was the norm. Powdered herbs, chalk, or fine sand were rubbed on the skin to absorb sweat and dirt, then brushed off. A bowl nearby holds such a mixture: lavender, barley flour, and powdered orris root. The scent is lovely, and the texture oddly soothing, like a gentle exfoliating handshake from Mother Nature. Historians still argue whether these hygiene rituals were widespread or limited to the upper classes. While written records exist in manner books and herbals, It's unclear how much trickled down to the peasantry. But one thing's certain. The still room knew the value of cleanliness, or at least pleasant-smelling camouflage. You eye a small jar of something beige and sticky, medieval deodorant balm. Applied with a cloth or finger, it smells faintly of rosewater and thyme. Surprisingly nice. You try a bit on your wrist. Not bad. You imagine walking through a medieval crowd wearing it and earning at least one approving nod from a passing goat. The apprentice reaches for a jar of frankincense resin. When crushed and warmed, it gives off a rich, almost citrusy aroma, used to scent clothes, homes, and occasionally feet. It's all-purpose like that. A small sachet of crushed resin and myrtle is tucked into a slipper near the hearth. The result? Surprisingly tolerable footwear. And now your favorite moment, a glimpse into the stranger side. On the top shelf sits a tiny silver tin. Inside, powdered crushed pearl mixed with honey and a dash of vinegar. A luxury face polish for noble women. Allegedly lightened the complexion, brightened the spirit, and maybe turned your skin into a fragile sugar crust. But beauty hurts, especially when it's made from ground mollusk and sour wine. The lady gestures toward a folded piece of parchment on the table. It's a personal recipe, a skin refreshener made with elderflower water, goose fat, and rosemary. It's applied at night, left on until morning, and hopefully removed before anyone sees you glowing like a waxed ham. You hear a small sneeze from the corner. The apprentice has just wafted powdered alum into her own nose. Again, she waves it off with dignity, but you sense she's counting the days until she can focus exclusively on perfumes. As the sun climbs higher, the still room hums with the quiet effort of making people slightly less smelly in a deeply unwashed world. Not perfect, but better. You glance at your own reflection in a polished copper bowl. Your skin glows slightly from the orris root. Your teeth are squeaky from bone ash. And your breath? Well, there's a reason no one stands too close in medieval times. Still, it's remarkable what this room can do with salt, herbs, and sheer willpower. The light shifts again, softening now, taking on that warm, syrupy glow that means mid-afternoon. The still room is quieter, but the air still pulses with the low hum of simmering. Today, you're invited into its strangest corner, the place where medicine meets imagination. The shelves of elixirs, tonics, and what you might generously call snake oil. You start with the tincture's glass vials, corked and sealed, each with handwritten labels that sound equal parts hopeful and suspicious. Elixir for melancholy, cordial of motherwort, tonic of warming blood. You're not sure whether to drink them, bathe in them, or wave them under someone's nose and hope for the best. The lady uncorks a bottle and pours a golden liquid into a tiny cup. Rosewater, honey, crushed fennel seeds, and a shaving of licorice root, she explains. Helps with nervousness and digestion and dreams. You sip. It's sweet, with a faint bitterness that tastes like something your grandmother might have sworn by and your doctor would absolutely question. This is the heart of the still room's medical chest. Not flashy, not surgical, just shelves and shelves of hopeful mixtures. Some work, some do something, and some are only here because a merchant swore they'd cure gout, melancholy, and hiccups in horses. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Medieval medicine was based largely on the theory of the four humors blood: phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. If you were ill, the goal was to restore balance among them. Too sluggish? You needed warming herbs. Too angry? cool compresses, and sweet syrups. Medicine was about moderation, not microorganisms. The lady reaches for her most prized concoction, golden tonic of the morning dew. It contains marigold petals picked at sunrise, steeped in white wine, and mixed with powdered pearl and a whisper of cinnamon. For vitality, she says. And vanity, if we're honest. You glance at the apprentice, who is busily chopping licorice root with something that looks more like a kitchen knife than a surgical tool. It's a bit dramatic, but effective. The chunks go into a small pot, followed by a trickle of apple vinegar and a few curls of dried orange peel. This one's meant to soothe the throat, or at least distract it with strong flavor. On the back shelf sits a row of small cloth bags, each tied shut with waxed twine. These are herb bundles meant for hanging near beds or wearing under clothing. One is marked for the choleric temperament and smells like dried lemon balm and mild judgment. Another, for lover's longing, gives off a more mysterious scent, possibly jasmine, possibly powdered beetle. You decide not to investigate too closely. A particularly ominous jar is labeled simply unicorn horn. You raise an eyebrow. The lady smirks. Powdered narwhal tusk, she whispers. Very expensive, very useless. Still, nobles paid dearly for it, convinced it could detect poison or cure disease. Historians still argue whether sellers believed their own hype or just leaned into a profitable mystery. And yes, snake oil, in a manner of speaking. There's a jar containing dried viper flesh, meant to be powdered and used in healing balms. Supposedly stimulates circulation and courage. The apprentice makes a face and nudges the jar farther back on the shelf. You spot a delicate blue vial with silver detailing clearly imported. Inside is a syrup made from violets, sugar, and poppy essence. It's meant for sleep, and it works. Possibly too well. 1 drop brings dreams. 2 drops bring silence. 3 drops. No one's entirely sure, and no one's willing to find out. A fringe tidbit. In some households, medicinal syrups were served in tiny carved spoons made from wood or horn. The shape wasn't just practical, it was considered part of the magic. Round bowls for calming, pointed for awakening. The lady prefers wide, flat spoons. Medicine should soothe, she says, not stab. You take a closer look at a thick glass bottle filled with a dark green liquid. Elixir for liver and mood. Ingredients: dandelion, lemon juice, and something the apprentice labeled maybe nettle in shaky ink. You decide not to sample it without supervision. Despite the chaos, everything is recorded in the ledger. Every experiment, every success, every failure. Cinnamon water, effective for coughs. Mead with mustard seed, not pleasant. Ginger tea, excellent. Apprentice overbrewed, explosive. And then there's the lady's own special creation, the heart cordial. She only brews it on the solstice. It contains hawthorn berries, wild honey, a pinch of rose, and 1 crushed garnet. To strengthen the heart, she says. Though mostly, it just tastes nice. You glance around the room, eyes tracing the shelves and racks, the bottles and bowls. It's a pharmacy, yes, but also a diary. Every elixir is a memory, a solution to a problem, a whispered hope that something sweet and strange might keep someone you love alive a little longer. And if not, at least it made their breath smell like fennel. You notice it before you see it. A change in the air, sharp, sour, and oddly metallic. The lady has shifted to a new task, one she doesn't take lightly. She's moving with more urgency now, Less grace, more purpose. The cause? A messenger arrived from the gate not long ago, breathless and flushed, whispering a single word: plague. That word alone is enough to transform the still room into a miniature war camp. Bottles are reorganized, bundles of herbs hastily brought in from the garden, and a large clay bowl of vinegar is set to steep with sage, thyme, lavender, and garlic. The room's usual rhythm is gone. It's all fast hands and faster prayers. You edge closer to the table when preparations are underway. The lady's hands are steady as she slices raw onions, not for cooking, but for warding. Some believe onions absorb bad air. Others think they simply distract you with the stinging. Either way, the bowlfuls are placed by doorways and windows like pungent little guardians. Your mainstream historical fact. During plague outbreaks, many believed in miasma theory, the idea that illness spread through bad air. And so, combating the air itself became priority number one. Hence the rise of strong-smelling herbs, vinegar rags, pomanders, and incense that doubled as spiritual backup. The apprentice stirs a mixture of wine vinegar and crushed garlic into a clay pot, muttering the ingredients aloud like a spell. This is Four Thieves vinegar, a legendary remedy said to have protected a gang of grave robbers during a plague outbreak. Did it work? Maybe. Did they make it up after getting caught? Almost certainly. Historians still argue whether the recipe ever existed in the form we know, or was simply a medieval marketing tactic. The room now smells like salad dressing at war with a forest fire. Next come the pomander's metal balls filled with dried herbs, resins, and spices. Clove, cinnamon, nutmeg, and a touch of camphor, all packed into tiny cages to be worn on belts or around necks. The lady hands you one and tells you to keep it near your face, just in case. You do so obediently, though the smell nearly knocks you backward. You'll survive, hopefully. On a nearby rack, linen cloths are being soaked in vinegar and hung to dry. These will be placed over mouths and noses if someone enters the room from outside. One unlucky apprentice once wore his too long and passed out from the fumes. They revived him with elderflower syrup and a rather sharp slap. You see the lady reach for a wax-sealed jar, powdered myrrh and resin of benzoin. This will be burned in a censer to fumigate the rooms. The smoke rises slowly, curling like fingers around the rafters, leaving behind a sweet, acrid trail that sticks to your clothes and your thoughts. A fringe tidbit. In some households, rats were hunted down and their bodies burned not out of superstition, but because someone had figured out that where there were rats, plague often followed. It would be centuries before the flea connection was made, but the instincts weren't always wrong. Next, the lady lays out her small pouch of medical charms. These are not science. These are hope wrapped in linen and silver thread. Tiny wooden crosses, scraps of parchment with Latin prayers, even a coin blessed by a wandering monk. Each one a talisman against what she cannot control. You glance over the recipe book where a fresh entry has just been inked. Protective salve, camphor, rosemary oil, wax, applied to nostrils. Do not ingest. Underneath it, if this works, make more. If not, bury this page. In the corner, a makeshift sick room is being readied just in case. Clean linen, warmed bricks wrapped in cloth, and bundles of dried yarrow to make tea. The lady sets a vial of poppy syrup beside the pillow, her face unreadable. It's not a cure, just comfort. Historians still debate how effective any of these treatments were. Was it the vinegar that helped, or just luck? Did the garlic keep death away, or did it simply keep everyone else at a safe distance? Some say psychological comfort alone could strengthen the will to live. Others argue these remedies were as useful as singing to the moon. But here, now, there's no time for that. The lady doesn't have the luxury of theory. She only has her hands, her herbs, and a relentless desire to do something. She works quickly, but never carelessly. Every mixture is tested, every cloth folded. Every apprentice is given a task. Even you find yourself handing her a sprig of lavender without being asked. At the doorway, the steward appears, pale and sweaty, asking about a cough in the kitchen boy. The lady sends him off with 2 bundles, one for steaming, one for steeping, and an order to wash the boy's bedding with vinegar water. Twice. You sit by the hearth, where a pot of elderberry and ginger tea simmers quietly. It's tart, warming, and hopefully antiviral. You sip it slowly, letting the heat chase the chill away from your spine. And despite the fear, there is a strange comfort in this place, in the motion, in the scent, in the defiance. Because even when the world outside grows dark and breathless, the still room remains bright, active, sharp-smelling, focused. It is the woman behind the ladle, the apprentice with the mortar, the herbs on the rack, all of them saying, in their own quiet way, "We are not helpless. Not yet." You hear her long before you see her, the apprentice, humming tunelessly, feet shuffling with the weary enthusiasm of someone who's boiled too many roots and inhaled far too much vinegar. She rounds the corner holding a tray of freshly corked vials, arms trembling slightly, chin smudged with something green and suspiciously sticky. You step aside, just in time to avoid becoming part of her next accident. This is the apprentice's life. Equal parts learning, labor, and occasional chemical warfare. She wakes before the birds, sleeps after the mice, and in between performs every task the lady doesn't have time or patience for. Her morning begins by lighting the fire. Not the big hearth, but the small one in the corner that warms the drying racks. She checks it for coals, coaxes it gently with a bellows, and mutters something under her breath that sounds like, "Please not again." Apparently, last week, she lit it too aggressively and set a sheet of mint-laced linen ablaze. The room smelled delightful and deeply dangerous for hours. Her duties shift with the hour. One moment grinding cloves, the next weighing out precisely 2 drams of dried valerian root. She never asks what anything is for, but she guesses, silently, based on who in the manor is coughing, limping, or looking uncomfortably red in the face. She keeps notes in a tiny leather-bound book, mostly observations. Lady sighed after sniffing violet oil must be for grief, and steward definitely stealing the honeyed thyme. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Most still-room apprentices were young women, often daughters of minor nobles or skilled servants, learning the arts of healing, preservation, and household management. This wasn't just education, it was positioning. A skilled still-room mistress could secure a favorable marriage, a post in another household, or even work in a nunnery, where her knowledge would be sacred. But for now, this apprentice is mostly stuck straining elderberry syrup through muslin that keeps collapsing into itself, like it's giving up on life. The lady appears at her side with a quick correction. Fold the corners before pouring, not after. The apprentice blushes, adjusts, and the syrup flows cleanly this time, dark and glossy as ink. Progress. She is trusted, but just barely. The lady double-checks her measurements, sniffs her tinctures, and occasionally relabels her jars in a hand that's both elegant and vaguely disappointed. But there is affection beneath it. Quiet, stern affection. The kind that sharpens rather than shields. On the shelf, you spot a small pile of burned scraps. Failed recipes. Or maybe just ones too risky to try again. The apprentice adds to the stack today a honey bomb that refused to solidify and instead became a sort of living, crawling mess. She didn't cry, but she did mutter an impressive number of medieval swear words under her breath. A fringe tidbit. Apprentices were sometimes given small exam tasks, such as creating a perfume blend from memory or replicating a salve with no written recipe. One mistake was forgiven. 2 meant extra chores. 3 meant an herbal enema and an afternoon of reflection. The lady believes strongly in hands-on learning. You watch the apprentice scrub mortar bowls with sand and vinegar, arms red from the chill water. She hums again, the tune unfamiliar but comforting, and you catch her whispering something to the herbs hanging overhead. A good luck habit, perhaps, or just loneliness talking back. Her station far corner, under the smallest window, is a cramped collection of cracked jars, half-used candles, and parchment scraps held down by stones. But it's hers. She's drawn little symbols on the wood, a spiral for focus, a sun for warmth, and one that suspiciously resembles a frog. You decide not to ask. Historians still argue whether apprentices were seen as true students or glorified laborers. Many did ascend to positions of authority, but just as many burned out literally and figuratively before they reached their prime. Some, too bold, tried mixing tonics alone and found themselves at best nauseous. At worst, a footnote in the ledger under lessons learned. This one seems determined not to be a footnote. You see it in the way she handles the poppy syrup, dropping each portion into wax-sealed doses with the precision of someone who's watched the lady's every move 100 times. She glances at you, proud but shy. "I only spilled one," she says, grinning. "I'm improving." You nod. She is. Later, she refills the firewood, checks the soap molds for cracks, and tends to the herb drying racks with the same reverence you might give a small shrine. She's careful with the mint, brutal with the wormwood, and gently rearranges a drooping bundle of marjoram so it won't bruise. Her hands, once soft, are now calloused and stained. There's always a patch of powdered something under her nails. But when she picks up a vial of her own making lavender sage and a hint of lemon, you see her smile. It's the kind of smile that says, "I made this. It didn't explode, and it actually smells nice." She's not the lady, not yet, but give her time. The wheel of the year is always turning, and the still room turns with it, never idle, never immune to the seasons creeping in through the cracks of the manor walls. You wake to a chill in the air, and the scent of wood smoke, herbs, and something vaguely fruity. It's autumn now, and that means a very different rhythm in the still room. You find the lady at the window, watching the garden surrender to gold and rot. She doesn't mourn it, she prepares for it. She knows the seasons are a kind of clock, and each one has its own needs, rituals, and chores. Spring was all about gathering, planting, distilling freshness. Summer brought the heaviest harvest and the busiest still days. But now, as the wind bites and the sun fades early, the focus shifts from creation to preservation. The drying racks are full of what's left from the garden last bundles of thyme, stalks of yarrow, handfuls of sage, turn brittle in the dry heat above the hearth. These will carry the household through the cold months. Nothing is wasted. Even the weeds get one last hopeful infusion. You help sort the dried herbs, brushing stray petals from your sleeves. The apprentice shows you a trick. Rub the leaves between your fingers. If they crackle like parchment and release their scent in a burst, they are ready. If they crumble to dust or smell like old hay, they've been left too long. Today's job is restocking the winter medicine shelf. Elderberries, now turned to syrup and sealed with wax. Horehound tincture for coughs. Dried rose hips for tea. There's a big jar of warming cordial, the lady's own recipe, a blend of cinnamon, ginger, honey, and wine, steeped under the harvest moon. Allegedly good for chills and winter melancholy. Definitely good for getting a bit tipsy during long sermons. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Medieval households marked the seasons with herbal and domestic routines long before calendars were common. Solstices and equinoxes weren't just symbolic, they were practical milestones. When to plant, when to harvest, when to dry, and when to pray a little harder that you wouldn't run out of lavender oil before February. The apprentice grumbles while bundling, kindling soaked in rosemary and salt. Bees will be burned during the winter feasts to cleanse the air. Mostly, they make the halls smell like forest and ham, which is a noticeable improvement. The lady pulls out her solstice box next to carved wooden chest she only opens 4 times a year. Inside are dried citrus peels, preserved cloves, and little slips of parchment with written charms. Some are prayers. Others are just lists. Heat balm, chill syrup, grief tea. There's even one labeled for the sadness in the dark, which makes you blink harder than expected. On the work table, a thick brown paste is cooling in a shallow bowl. It's a salve made from beeswax, pine resin, and mulled wine. Good for cracked skin and sore joints. Terrible for tablecloths. The apprentice spoons it into little pots, lined with scraps of linen, humming a tune that might be a hymn, or just something she made up after too many hours grinding mustard seed. You glance out the window. The garden is almost bare now. The mint looks like it's seen battle. The lavender stands dry and gray, like a soldier left too long on the field. But even this fading holds purpose. Roots are still alive under the soil. Seeds are drying in small paper bundles above the hearth, waiting for spring. Fringe tidbit. During the longest nights of winter, some households burned bundles of juniper, mugwort, or bay leaves to chase away spirits. Whether it worked is debatable, but it smelled amazing, and that counts for something. The lady instructs the apprentice to mix a winter perfume stronger, deeper, more resinous. "We'll need it," she mutters, "when the stew smells like boiled sock and the chimney smokes back at us." The result is a warm blend of cedar, clove, and the last drops of precious ambergris. The apprentice sneaks a bit onto her wrists, then pretends she didn't. Everyone pretends not to notice. Historians still argue whether these seasonal rituals were born from necessity or superstition. Were they effective preservation strategies? Or just comfort cloaked in routine? Either way, the results are the same. A still room stocked with remedies, warmed with memory, and scented with readiness. You help with the final task of the day, marking the new jars. A slow, steady process of dipping quill and ink, writing names, dates, notes, rosehip cordial sharp, not too sweet. Thyme oil burns, slightly warns the steward. Valerian root smells like feet store far from perfumes. The last light fades through the high window. catching dust motes and curling steam. The still room feels different in autumn, less urgent, more reflective. It's not about invention. No, it's about tending, remembering, waiting. You wrap a jar of solstice cordial in linen and tuck it onto the highest shelf. The lady nods. "Let's hope we won't need too much of it this year," she says. But you both know better. The still room feels quieter now, like it's holding its breath. The hearth glows, but no one's rushing. You sense something else is about to happen, not the tidy work of crafting tonics or preserving herbs, but the murkier, more mysterious side of things. The part that makes people whisper, the part the apprentice isn't supposed to talk about in the great hall. The lady opens a drawer beneath the ledger table, pulls out a small, flat box wrapped in waxed cloth, and places it on the workbench like she's unveiling a relic. You lean in. Inside, nestled between folds of dark velvet, are a series of odd, delicate tools: a twisted glass rod, a curved copper scoop, a handful of painted stones, and what looks like an ancient moon chart etched into bone. You've stumbled into the still room's most forbidden corner, the alchemical side quests. Let's be clear, this isn't about turning lead into gold. Well, not just that. It's more subtle, more symbolic. A little science, a little superstition, and a lot of "don't tell the steward." Here's where healing blends into transformation, where the line between potion and prayer becomes a smudge of ink and cinnamon dust. The lady sets out her alchemical ingredients: salt, sulfur, mercury, the classical trinity. She mixes them with crushed herbs, basil for protection, wormwood for clarity, and just a pinch of frankincense for mystery. The apprentice watches wide-eyed. This isn't in her usual lesson plan. Your mainstream historical fact. Alchemy in the Middle Ages wasn't just about fool's gold and failed experiments. It was deeply philosophical, blending science with spiritual growth. As above, so below, they said. Meaning, transform the matter, transform the soul. Many still brew women believed the work they did, healing, distilling, tending, was its own form of alchemy. Today's project? A cosmetic paste that allegedly reveals truth. The recipe includes ground pearl, rainwater collected under a full moon, and ash from a candle burned during a saint's feast day. The result? A shimmering, silvery mixture with the consistency of wishful thinking. You run your fingers near it, not through it. You're not reckless and feel the air shift. Like the room's watching. The lady murmurs as she stirs. Phrases in Latin, half remembered from books kept under lock and key. Solve et coagula. Dissolve, then reform. It's the core principle of alchemy, and also what happens when the apprentice spills vinegar into anything important. And here comes the fringe tidbit. Some still rooms were rumored to contain spirit traps, small bottles sealed with wax, used to catch bad dreams, wandering souls, or leftover emotions. You find one now, tucked behind a row of rosemary oil vials. It's filled with misty glass beads and a scrap of cloth marked with a single tear. The apprentice swears she didn't put it there. The lady says nothing. The alchemical work isn't constant more like a seasonal hobby or a personal obsession. Some days, the lady tries to distill a better ink for the ledger. Other days, she's testing moon-bathed rose oil for dream enhancement. Once, she tried making a tincture of divine presence, which turned out to smell mostly like cinnamon and self-confidence. Historians still argue whether these alchemical pursuits were genuine proto-science or elaborate metaphors wrapped in expensive parchment. Were these women experimenting with chemistry or cloaking their spiritual work in the language of potions? The answer is probably yes. You notice the lady lighting a candle made from beeswax and tallow. She pricks her finger and adds a drop of blood to the flame. For insight, she says, and to remind the elements who's in charge. You try not to look too surprised. The apprentice doesn't even flinch anymore. A half-finished chart hangs nearby, showing planetary alignments and herbal correspondences. Mars rules the nettle. Venus rules rose. Mercury, of course, oversees peppermint and poor decisions. You glance at today's date. Mars is rising. The lady nods. Best to make courage tonics before supper. Even the tools here feel different. The alembic used for these mixtures is smaller, more delicate, almost ornamental. The ladles are copper, not iron, and the jars are sealed with silk ribbons instead of wax, as if the ingredients inside aren't dangerous but proud. You find a bottle labeled Aqua Solis, sun water, meant to be collected at dawn on Midsummer's Day, steeped with calendula petals and stored in clear glass. Used to illuminate the inner eye, though the apprentice says it mostly gives her weird dreams about singing radishes. And then there's the ink. Oh, the ink. The lady keeps a separate bottle black with hints of purple for recording alchemical recipes. It's made from oak galls, vinegar, and a touch of iron scraped from an old horseshoe. The lines it draws never fade, which is slightly unsettling, but undeniably elegant. You ask her if any of these experiments ever work. She looks at you for a long time and says, "They all do. Just not always the way I expect." You don't press further. The apprentice finishes labeling the truth paste with a tiny crescent moon symbol. Then she adds a skull and crossbones for good measure. "Just in case," she mumbles. The still room is quiet again, but it hums beneath the silence. The herbs dry. The fire burns low. The paste glimmers faintly in its jar. Not everything here is meant to be understood. Some things are meant to be felt, trusted, or at the very least, labeled clearly and kept on the high shelf. You make a note to sleep with one eye open tonight, just in case the Aqua Solis starts whispering. The lady lifts the heavy leather-bound ledger from its place beneath the herbs and vinegar shelf and places it on the central table with a soft thump that sends a little puff of dust into the candlelight. You've seen her write in it before brief, efficient notations scribbled between boiling, bottling, and bossing people about, but today she opens it fully, revealing the secret heart of the still room. The ledger is not just a record book. It's the memory of the manor. Every tincture made, every experiment attempted, every poor soul who drank something questionable and lived to tell the tale, or didn't, is documented here in crisp ink, soft charcoal, or faint pencil. The lady doesn't believe in forgetting. She believes in documenting and gently judging. The first pages are neat, clearly copied from an older hand, possibly her mother's. Recipes for soap of almond oil, cordial of mint, and ointment for cracked heels. Everything has a purpose. Some have stars beside them, her favorites. Others have tiny skulls. You figure out why quickly. One reads, "Syrup for dreaming tastes of violet. Effective. Apprentice took too much. Spoke fluent owl for an hour. Skull, underlined twice." Here's your mainstream historical fact. Household ledgers like this weren't uncommon in large medieval manors. Some served as inventories, some as recipe books, and some, like this one, as a hybrid of science journal, diary, and cautionary tale. They were often handed down through generations. with new entries scribbled in the margins and old ones updated with cheerful edits like "U.S.E. less garlic. Trust in me." You run your hand across the vellum pages. The ink changes shade as the years pass dark walnut brown, then faded rust, then deep black. You can track the evolution of the still room by pen color alone. One section is labeled simply, "The Great Lavender Incident." You don't ask. There's a page devoted to unruly smells, listing failed perfume recipes with notes like, "Smelled like feet in a rose garden. Too much amber. Stewart fled. Do not combine cumin and clove again. Ever." The apprentice leans over your shoulder and snorts at a page titled, "To Cure Lovesickness." The recipe involves rosewater, cinnamon, and the hair of a red-haired man. There's a dried flower pressed next to it. You raise an eyebrow. The lady says nothing. Then there are the poison pages, fewer in number, but written with the neatest penmanship. "These aren't for assassination," she says, "but for identification and antidote preparation. If you know how to make it," she says, "you know how to survive it." The entries are annotated carefully. "Foxglove dangerous. Heart flutters. Use only in tiny amounts, if at all. Hemlock no antidote. See also Socrates. Belladonna used for eye drops only under full moon and heavy prayer." A fringe tidbit? One recipe for a beauty balm includes snail slime and powdered eggshell, and it has a little smiley face next to it. Whether that means it worked or just made the lady giggle is unclear. And tucked in the back beneath a fold of linen and a pressed lavender sprig, you find the mistake section. It's not labeled that way, but it's obvious. Batch curled. Stirred counterclockwise, the apprentice got hives. Tried elderberry wine instead of vinegar. Now the walls sparkle. It's a little museum of disaster, and honestly, it's your favorite part. The apprentice has her own pages too. Her handwriting starts out shaky, all loops and panic, then slowly straightens into something sure. Her first entry is adorable. "Today I learned to spell tincture." Her most recent saying, "Don't trust the licorice jar. Something's growing in it." Personal growth. Historians still argue whether these household ledgers were scientific documents or superstitious doodles. But flipping through this one, it's both. It's logical. It's intuition. It's the documentation of care, failure, and hope. The lady dips her quill in the ink pot and begins a new entry. You watch her write slowly, deliberately. "Rose and marshroom salve successful. Smooth skin on the steward's hands. No rash. Apprentice did well." The apprentice pretends not to beam, but you see it. The lady pauses and adds a final line. "Save this recipe. Might be worth passing down." You look around the still room, at the vials, the bundles, the scuffed floor, the faintly humming cauldron, and realize that this entire space is a ledger, a living one, written in lavender and vinegar, in soot and silver, in burns and blisters and triumphs. She closes the book, ties it with cord, and returns it to its drawer. Nothing is forgotten. The wind howls outside the fixed stone walls, rattling a shutter and sending the faintest chill through the still room. It smells different today, less medicinal, more suspicious. Someone's burning something resinous near the hearth. The scent is sharp, like pine and pepper. Not unpleasant, just loaded. You glance at the lady, who is grinding dried marjoram with unusual vigor. She doesn't say much, but her jaw is tight, and the apprentice is keeping her head down. Something's off. Then you hear it. Distant laughter, hushed and uneasy. Not from the hall, not from the kitchens, but from outside, the kind of whispers that travel with rumor, like leaves blowing across the dirt road from the village. Rumors of healing, rumors of power, rumors of witches. You realize what this is. Every still room eventually gathers whispers. It's the nature of the work transforming things, healing things, knowing things, all wrapped in the intoxicating scent of knowledge and clove oil. And in a world where too much knowledge, especially in the hands of a woman, becomes dangerous, it doesn't take long for admiration to tip sideways into suspicion. Here's your mainstream historical fact. While not all still room women were accused of witchcraft, many stood on that uneasy threshold, especially those who healed the sick, made love potions, or heaven forbid, knew how to stop a nosebleed with 3 herbs and a chant. The church watched them. The neighbors whispered. And if a cow died suddenly, or a baby was born with a birthmark, guess who got blamed first? The apprentice, oblivious to the rising tension, drops a bundle of rue into a mixing bowl with a grin. To banish ill will, she says, tossing it like seasoning. The lady doesn't smile. She lifts the mortar and adds wormwood, ground acorns, and a pinch of salt. Don't mock it, she murmurs. There's power in this room. People don't like what they don't understand. You glance around at the shelves, suddenly aware of how strange it might all seem to someone unfamiliar. Bundles of dried herbs, bloodroot in glass jars, oils that change color in the light, the ledger with its star-marked pages and Latin scribbles. If you didn't know better, you'd think it was a witch's den, or at least something that could pass for one after dark. You remember the fringe tidbit you overheard once. In some regions, women in charge of still rooms wore iron rings or pinned sprigs of vervain to their aprons, not just for protection from spirits, but to show villagers they weren't practicing forbidden arts. Sort of an herbal, I'm not that kind of sorceress badge. The lady walks to the small side cabinet, the one usually locked, and draws out a cloth bundle. Inside, protective charms. Some are silly, a stone carved with the sun, a twig twisted in twine, but others are beautiful. A tiny silver cross, a medallion of Saint Hildegard, a strip of dried rowan bark inscribed with old runes. She arranges them along the windowsill and says nothing. The apprentice finally notices the silence. Did someone say something in the village? She asks, softer now. The lady nods once. A cow died. A child had a fever. We cured the child. The cow stayed dead. You sit down slowly on the bench near the fire. The potion bubbling there is gentle rose, honey, valerian, but now it feels heavier. Like everything in the still room has weight. Not just ingredients, but meaning. Historians still argue whether these accusations of witchy behavior were fear-based control or genuine cultural belief. Was the still room feared because of its mystery? Or because it represented independent female knowledge? Something the medieval world wasn't quite sure how to categorize without tying it to firewood. The lady, of course, is careful. She always has been. She labels everything clearly. She shares her healing knowledge with a local midwife. She never accepts coin for love potions. And she burns rosemary when she works, partly for clarity, partly for the neighbors' noses. But even the careful ones are watched. Later that evening, the steward stops by and hands her a folded note. No words, just a sprig of yarrow tied with a red thread. A quiet message. Someone sees, someone supports, Still rooms are places of healing, yes, but also of resistance, of quiet rebellion, of standing firm while the world outside grows nervous about women who know too much. The apprentice wipes her hands on her apron. Will we be all right? The lady nods. We always are. And that's when you understand something deeper. The still room isn't just about soap and salves. It's about memory, power, protection. It's a place where knowledge lives passed from woman to woman like a secret prayer, long after the fire dies down and the rumors fade. You watch as the lady smudges the doorway with salt and vinegar, a protection ritual older than parchment. The apprentice places vervain on the shelf by the window. You light a candle. No one says a word. And the still room, for all its jars and bundles and bubbling brews, becomes what it always was, a sanctuary, not of sorcery, but of survival. Morning brings a hush the kind that settles gently on the still room like a blanket. The fire is low, the air is cool, and there's a rare stillness in the space where, usually, something is always boiling, drying, or brewing. But today, the lady does not reach for her ledger or her ladle. Instead, she opens the shutters. Light spills in pale and clean, slicing across the rows of drying herbs, the bundled linens, the tidy rows of bottles sealed with wax and careful hands. For once, everything looks complete. No work in progress, no emergencies. Just a moment to breathe. She moves with a slow, deliberate grace, placing her fingers on each item as she passes. The dried peppermint, the jar of comfrey salve, the bundle of cinnamon bark tied with faded blue thread. Everything here holds a story, a memory, a use. You sense she's not just checking stock, she's saying goodbye. Because even the still room, that eternal space of transformation and remedy, doesn't last forever. Not like this. You follow her as she walks toward the far end of the room, where a wooden chest rests beneath a linen cloth embroidered with rosemary and marigolds. She lifts the cover, revealing items set aside for when she's gone, not just for the household, but for whoever comes after. There's a small pouch of seeds, a tightly wrapped bundle of dried lemon balm, a jar labeled for sore hearts, and a thin book bound in worn leather. You recognize the handwriting, hers. A personal version of the ledger, simpler, neater, annotated with little stars and smiley faces. It's not just recipes, it's guidance. She sets the book on the table. For the next one, she says softly, and you understand this isn't an ending. This is a legacy. The still room may change, may pass hands, may one day become something else entirely, a pantry, a storeroom, even a forgotten wing, but the knowledge doesn't vanish. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Though many still rooms faded from use as medicine became more professionalized and commercialized, their echoes live on in everything from modern herbalism to skincare. From DIY wellness trends to that drawer your grandmother still keeps full of dried lavender and half-used salves. You sit for a moment beside the apprentice, who now seems older than before. Not in years, but in bearing. She moves confidently, no longer watching every step. She stirs a batch of hair tonic with a steady hand and hums a song that you realize is her own. The lady doesn't give formal farewells. She simply nods, ties her apron with a final tug, and begins tidying the tools one last time. She doesn't stop to reflect, or weep, or wax poetic. That's not her way. She believes in preparation, in structure. Even now, with no crisis, no fire to put out, She's preparing the room for what comes next. A fringe tidbit. In some households, it was tradition for a still room mistress to leave behind one mystery jar, an unlabeled vial meant to be opened only in great need. Not magical, not poisonous, just meaningful. You find one on the top shelf, wrapped in beeswax cloth, cool to the touch. You don't open it. Not yet. Historians still argue what exactly made the still room so powerful. Was it the knowledge, the rituals, the plants, the women themselves? The truth, you suspect, is simpler. It was a space where care met craft, where time slowed down just enough to let healing begin. And now it's time to wind down. You sit on the stone bench near the hearth, now just glowing coals, and let the silence settle around you. The scents have softened, the sharp edge of vinegar long gone, replaced by the warm sweetness of dried herbs and beeswax. Nothing's brewing, nothing's burning, just the quiet tick of the wooden beam cooling in the rafters. The lady has gone, not far, just into the garden perhaps, or maybe into memory. The apprentice, her hands folded in her lap, watches the door like she expects her mentor to return at any moment. She probably will, in 1,000 small ways. You lean your head back and close your eyes. The still room lives on, not just in stone walls or ledgers, but in habits passed down. In the way you brew your tea with mint when your stomach hurts. In the scent of lavender on your pillow. In the homemade lip balm that lives at the bottom of your bag. You imagine the next caretaker of the still room. Different hands, maybe different rules, but the same sense of care. The same reverence for what can be made from what grows quietly, patiently, beneath the sun and the moon. So rest now. Let the echoes of the still room lull you. The clink of glass, the rustle of herbs, the slow drip of something warming on the hearth. It's still here, waiting. And you, dear listener, are part of its story now. Sweet dreams.